Astronomy in Reverse by Painsley. Chapter 4. These Days Together with You. When Peter wakes up hours later, Bucky is sprawled out on his mattress, not really trying to sleep, simply resting in the dark and quiet of the apartment. "Hey!" Peter says, voice roughened by sleep and from crying so much earlier. Bucky looks up at him from the mattress on the floor and takes in the boy's disheveled look, the bed and the tear tracks on his cheeks.
"How you feeling?"
he asks. Peter stretches, arms and legs hanging off the ends of the love seat, before he relaxes again and blinks up at the ceiling, considering. "Thirsty!" Bucky smiles, reaches over, and grabs the not quite empty bottle of Gatorade they'd been sharing earlier.
"Here,"
he says as he tosses it up to the love seat, impressed by the effortless way Peter catches it. A few minutes of silence go by after Peter drains the bottle, and it feels alien to Bucky. As familiar as he is with his apartment being quiet, Peter can't seem to stand silences. Though maybe he just isn't a morning person, one of those people who needs extra time for their personality to manifest after they first wake up. The silence stretches on, both of them staring up at the dark ceiling from their respective sleeping surfaces, until Peter quietly breaks the hush by whispering, "Did you really mean what you said?" Bucky turns to look at him, and Peter rolls over on his side, curling up and gazing at Bucky with his big dark eyes that look black from the lack of light in the room.
"Yes,"
he tells him, keeping their gazes locked together.
"I meant it, kid. I know this place is a dump, and it'll be cramped, but we'll make it work. You can keep tutoring and save for your school fees, and I'll handle the rest. I took a full-time job earlier."
"You did?" Peter asks, visibly surprised. "I mean, that's awesome. Congrats. What kind of job is it?"
"Mechanic,"
he replies, stretching out himself, wincing slightly when his left arm falters, the kink in the middle disrupting his movement. He notices the worried look Peter gives him and says, before the kid can ask if he's all right,
"Hoping this old man fix up old meters so he can sell them. I'm just hoping he has some bikes on that lot of his."
"Bikes?" Peter repeats, his interest piqued. "You mean like motorcycles?" Bucky smiles.
"Yeah,"
he says, and doesn't bother to mention that the ID he swiped was a motorcycle license, or that wasn't exactly an accident.
"Been a long time since I've been able to get my hands on a bike."
"I've never been on a motorcycle," Peter says. "What's it like? Isn't it scary?"
"Nah,"
he shrugs, still smiling.
"Have you ever ridden a horse?"
"Like a real one?" Bucky shoots him a salacious look, snickering a little under his breath.
"No, I mean one of those wooden sticks with a horse head on the end. Yes, a real one, you punk."
Giggling, Peter nuzzles further into the couch, pulling the blanket tighter around him. "No, I haven't. Why?"
"Riding a horse and riding a bike aren't really similar at all," Bucky says. "But if you've been on a horse before, you know what to expect after riding a bike. Your legs will hurt like a bitch. Unless you do it often, you'll be walking funny for the next couple days. It's not nearly as bad on a bike as it is on a horse, though. But you're a shrimp, so even a bike would probably make your thighs cramp up the next day."
Peter listens, watching him curiously from where he's lounging on the love seat as Bucky talks, with a look on his face like he's simply enjoying listening to the man speak. Then he says, "I think I'd rather a horse than a bike, personally." Bucky grins, unsurprised.
"Really? You, the kid who pets every animal he sees? I'm shocked."
Peter grins back, turning over onto his back and gazing up at the ceiling again. "I can't help it, I like animals."
Again. Shocked.
"Ha ha!" Peter closes his eyes and Bucky glances at him, waiting to see if the kid will fall back asleep or not. He lies still and absolutely quiet, willing his own body to relax enough to drift off, watching Peter mindfully breathe in and out as he attempts to make himself go back to sleep. After a while of neither one of them successfully nodding off, Peter opens his eyes again, glancing over at Bucky as he says, "I can't sleep."
"I could see that,"
Bucky replies. "I need to go on patrol," says Peter as he sits up. I'm too restless. I gotta go check things out." Bucky frowns.
"It's pretty late,"
he says, the barest hint of sternness in his tone. Peter looks back up at him midway through standing up on the couch. "But," he says unsurely, glancing down at the love seat and then turning his pleading gaze back to Bucky. "It's Saturday?" In spite of himself, Bucky can't help the smile that spreads back across his face, helpless in the wake of the kid's somewhat pouting expression.
All right.
he says as he stands up, also grabbing his jacket, gloves, and hat from the floor beside his mattress.
I'll make you a deal. I'll go with you, you can patrol, and then we'll do a little training after to make sure we burn all that energy you have, so we can go back and get some sleep. Sound fair?
Yeah! Peter beams, slipping his backpack on over his hoodie and then donning his shoes beside Bucky at the door. They find a new rooftop in a different part of Queens, switching it up so that Peter can patrol a different area each night and to avoid making a pattern, though Bucky doesn't tell Peter about that part of it. Peter steps into his Spider-Man outfit, attaches his web shooters to his wrists, and says, "Okay, I'll be back soon."
Just a short patrol.
Bucky says,
Just an hour. I don't want you screwing up your sleep schedule.
"Okay," Peter says, and Bucky can hear the smile in his voice. He watches the kids swing off the roof without a single fear of falling and casually leans forward on the railing so we can keep watching until Peter is out of sight. When the boy's gone, Bucky lets himself sag, lets the tension leave his muscles as he drops most of his upper body onto the railing, hanging his head exhaustedly. What is he doing? What is he going to tell Peter when Hydra... Well, Captain America finds him! And what will happen to the kid then? Peter has already made some pretty big sacrifices just so he could stay in Queens. Pretty safe bet he wouldn't be willing to drop everything and run away with Bucky to Romania if they were ever found. But what then? Would Peter choose to stay here all alone, go back to living in his school and having no one the same as Bucky? Living off of gas station food and forgetting what it feels like to have a home? Could he do that? Could Bucky? There's no point in trying to convince himself anymore that he isn't attached now. He knows he is. Knew it that day when Peter was late getting home from school, when all Bucky could think of is how badly he needed the kid to be alright. He cares for Peter, and he wants this. He wants to give the kid the best home he can, wants to make sure Peter has somewhere safe to go and someone looking after him, even someone as screwed up as he is, because damn it, for everything that is shit in his life, he wouldn't let this be shit too. He'll find a way to do right by this kid. He has to. Accepting Frank's offer had been a step. At least he'll be able to provide food and shelter. But what about his plan? What would Peter want? And worse, how is Bucky supposed to ask him? He can't tell him who he is. Worse than Peter being scared of him, he could become a target for Hydra if they found out he had information on Bucky. And if they found out about Peter's abilities... A sharp metallic crack snaps Bucky from his thoughts. He glances down and sees his arm fisted tensely in the roof's concrete railing, the metal groaning and bending unnaturally as it squeezes the concrete like Play-Doh. Bucky has to manually dislodge it and spends the rest of the hour trying to maneuver his arm back into its usual position, untwisting it from its bent angle just in time as Peter lands gracefully beside him. "Pretty quiet night," he says, then notices Bucky holding his arm and quickly adds, "Are you okay?"
"Yeah,"
says Bucky, letting his arm drop to his side and hiding the slight discomfort he feels when it doesn't hang as straight as it was previously.
"That's just being temperamental again. You good?"
Peter doesn't look convinced, eyeing him worriedly, even as he says, "Yeah, stopped a Grand Theft bicycle, scared off a couple of sketchy loiterers, and caught some lady's houseplant when she accidentally knocked it off her windowsill." Bucky grins, reaching over with his right hand as Peter pulls his mask off and ruffling his already unruly curls.
"The hero this city truly needs."
Peter's eyes light up. "That's what we should watch next! Batman!"
"Tomorrow,"
says Bucky, leaving no room for argument.
"We still have some training to do before it's lights out for you, pal. How would you feel about a race?"
Peter scans the rooftop, confused. "Here?"
"No, I was thinking we could hit the park on the way home,"
he replies, not missing the warm look in Peter's eyes when he says, "Home!"
"If anyone asks, we could just say we're training for a marathon."
"At 1:30 a.m.? Bucky shrugs.
"It's more believable than saying you're Spider-Man and you can't sleep."
Peter laughs, shooting Bucky a mock glare before he pulls his regular clothes out from his bag and begins changing into them. They head to the park between here and their apartment, stopping at the entrance and surveying how empty and dark the wooded area is as Bucky glances up at the sign beside the trail.
"The trail is just under 2 miles long,"
he says, reading from the sign.
"So if we do 5 laps, that should be enough to burn some energy."
Peter nods, already stretching his legs, arms, and back as he stares down the pitch-dark path. "What are we racing for?"
"Loser does 1,000 push-ups."
"Oh!" Peter groans before grinning up at it playfully.
In that case, you are so going down!
Bucky stops, returning the playful expression on the kid's face with a raised eyebrow.
Yeah, we'll see about that, Pipsqueak. On your marks.
Bucky doesn't hold back and feels no shame about doing so. After all, the whole point of this is to tire the kid out enough that he can sleep. He has no qualms about using his enhanced speed, and besides, Peter has enhanced speed too. But Bucky's used to sprinting long distances, used to running, to chasing and being chased, and while Peter's in good shape, he clearly hasn't had to sprint like this outside of gym class. Bucky loses him in the first 30 seconds, and by the time he finishes all 3 laps, Peter is a solid 2 minutes behind him and is dead on his feet when he comes jogging around the corner. Panting and exhausted, the kid leans forward and rests his hands on his knees, heaving in big gulps of air as his chest lurches. That, he gasps, completely out of breath, sucked!
It's about to suck even more.
Bucky grins.
Drop it, give me 1,000.
What?
Hey, those were the stakes,
he says, a shitting grin spreading across his face.
Loser does 1,000 push-ups, so down you get.
He can't help but burst out laughing at the absolutely pathetic whine Peter makes when he collapses down on the ground, exhausted, getting into position and begrudgingly pushing himself back up as he begins to count. He goes steady for a solid 10 minutes before his movements become completely sluggish and half-assed, until he finally drops flat on the ground, gasping. I'm dying! He pants.
Come on, you still have 70 to go.
Bucky says, but he can see that Peter's eyes are hardly staying open, that they appear unfocused, blurry in the wake of his exhaustion. Bucky kneels down in front of him just as Peter closes his eyes, passing out.
Come on, kid.
Bucky says as he gently lifts Peter up, turning and pulling him up onto his back in a piggyback, holding him by his legs. Peter's arms dangle from Bucky's shoulders before they tighten sleepily around his neck, just scarcely tight enough to hold him up.
Let's get you home.
Peter is well and truly asleep before they even make it out of the park, the embodiment of a deep, well-earned, relaxed sleep, warm and comforting against Bucky's back. Everything is completely different living with someone. Bucky knew things wouldn't be the same, but it still surprises him just how different things are. The meager possessions Peter had stored around his school fill Bucky's otherwise empty apartment and make it feel like a completely different place. The books, clothes, school projects spread around everywhere actually make it look like someone lives here instead of just squatting in it. His days are different, too, after starting his job. Frank is an older, bald black gentleman who blessedly doesn't try and force Bucky into small talk or casual conversations, instead leaving him alone to work in the garage behind his dealership, an arrangement that suits Bucky just fine. Sharon, Frank's wife and the dealership's receptionist, is a little more eager to get to know and befriend him, but thankfully Frank is always nearby to intercede on his behalf. The Monday to Friday routine he and Peter have worked out is convenient and domestic, and leaves Bucky feeling like he's in a completely new place in his own home. They wake up and have breakfast together, take turns making their lunches to take with them, although Bucky ends up doing it quite a bit more often than Peter does, and then they head out, Bucky walking Peter to the train station before he gets on his own bus. In the evenings, Bucky gets home a solid hour after Peter does, and typically finds the kid on the love seat or at the counter doing his homework, or on the rare days when he doesn't have any, watching movies on his laptop. Peter begs him to get internet in the apartment, but Bucky refuses. Can't say yes, even if he wanted to. So sometimes the kid leaves a note saying he went to the nearest cafe or library to use their Wi-Fi, and that he'll be home before dinner. Dinner, unsurprisingly, is the one thing in Bucky's life that hasn't changed. It was already a domestic occurrence before Peter moved in. Now the only thing that's different is they have more money and typically make bigger meals. Peter actually gets to eat his fill, and it pleases and upsets Bucky in equal measure, happy that he could finally satisfy Peter's hunger, and angry that Peter was ever allowed to go without for so long in the first place. On the weekends, Bucky still walks What's-Her-Face's dogs, usually with Peter tagging along, and still helps out the occasional caller for some cash on the side, and does some work at the motel when they need him to. He doesn't have to anymore. Frank pays him enough for rent, food, and savings combined, but he pockets the extra cash and uses it to make sure Peter has everything he needs, like another backpack, for example, since the kid has his stolen again. Or sometimes he uses it to treat them to some takeout, like tonight. Peter had begging him for the last straight week to take him back to Del Mar's. So when Bucky brought in an extra $80 on the weekend, they made plans to meet at Del Mar's today for some much-deserved sandwiches. Given that Peter gets out of class earlier than Bucky leaves work, he's probably already there waiting for him, no doubt pestering Del Mar in that plucky, good-natured way of his that always brings a smile to his face. Bucky gets off at the bus stop 2 blocks away and starts trekking to the sandwich shop, eyes scanning the streets as they always do, his cap pulled low, his jacket undone for the gradually warming weather, only his left hand ungloved. He spots Peter from a couple 100 yards away across a busy street, standing outside Del Mar's store innocuously in his bright red hoodie. Bucky smiles to himself, watching the kid peer into the busy rush of afternoon traffic, searching the crowd of pedestrians for him. The smile falters when, almost as if appearing out of nowhere, an older man walks up to Peter and begins speaking to him, a large, overly friendly smile stretched across his face. Bucky moves, making a beeline for them, intently watching the changes in Peter's expression from across the street. The look of curiosity morphing into his usual compassionate smile. Before, to Bucky's incredulity, the man turns and begins walking down the street, Peter following behind him. Maybe they know each other, Bucky silently hopes. He's a smart kid. He has to know better than to go off with strangers. He starts to think before mentally kicking himself. Peter obviously doesn't know better. If he did, he never would have latched onto Bucky the way he had in the first place. As he impatiently waits for the light on the crosswalk to turn green, he keeps his eyes on Peter's back until he and the man he's trailing after turn a corner, disappearing from sight. Crap. Bucky curses, rudely maneuvering through the flock of pedestrians as he crosses the road, marching down the sidewalk in Peter's direction with more force than he normally would, typically preferring to move stealthily, to blend in, to walk without being seen, but his nerves won't let him, urging him to stop after the two of them, almost aggressively, his unease billowing. Something doesn't feel right. Bucky turns the corner, peering over the heads of the people littering the street, searching anxiously for Peter's red sweater or the man's balding head. He pushes past the people in his way, ignoring the outraged comments, serpentinely winding through the crowd, using his muscular build to his advantage to incite others to make way for him. There's no sign of Peter or the man. Where could they have gone? Bucky makes it to another intersection and turns down each road frantically. They could have gone anywhere, but if the man has evil intentions, as Bucky's dreading, he would have chosen the emptier road. Bucky turns down the quieter, narrower road that leads directly to an industrial complex and begins agitatedly checking the alleyway separating each warehouse building, checking behind everything that would seem like a good place to hide behind if you didn't want to be seen, which is everywhere in this complex given how deserted it is, all the workers having gone over the day. He checks everywhere and is just about to turn around and head back to the crossroads when he peers down the last alley and sees them. Peter lifting a heavy toolbox into the back of a big pickup truck, the man on the other end having clearly having no idea that Peter could easily lift it himself. Bucky pauses, relief and something like embarrassment flooding him. Maybe he was being too overprotective? Peter is a good kid who does nice things for people, and if some guy needed help loading his toolbox into his truck, who was Bucky to tell Peter that he can't help? He decides to go back to wait for Peter outside Del Mar's. When it happens, they finish securing the toolbox in the trunk, and the man closes the gate while Peter wipes his hands off on his jeans. But then the man turns to Peter and places his hand on his arm, too low, too close to his elbow, a position that makes Bucky's nerves spike again, and then he's crowding Peter against the trunk, leaning into him, saying something, though they're too far away for Bucky to hear. "Hit him, kid!" Bucky internally screams as the man grabs Peter by the shoulders. "Hit him!" But Peter doesn't. He doesn't fight back. He just stands there unmoving. Why isn't he moving? And then Bucky sees his face, wide brown eyes, terrified, his whole body shrinking in on itself, plastered to the side of the truck where he's frozen in place, and Bucky is charging toward them as fast as he can, his arm already vibrating angrily in his sleeve, murderous rage erupting within him. Peter's legs are shaking, his small body boxed in by the man's larger one hand pinning his shoulder to the truck and the other reaching for his belt! Bucky slams into the pervert with a lethal amount of force, grabbing the wrist of the hand that had been undoing Peter's belt and snapping it, a clean break, feeling the bone beneath his metal fingers completely separate into two pieces. Moving too fast for the man to even comprehend, Bucky releases his broken wrist and instead grabs him by the throat, slamming him into the side of the warehouse and squeezing his windpipe tight enough to muffle his screams of pain before they even have a chance to escape. The man tries to gasp for air, tears of agony immediately leaking from his bloodshot eyes, and Bucky tightens his grip, almost crushing the man's throat in his metal hand, lifting him off the ground until they're eye level.
Listen to me, you piece of shit!
Bucky snarls vehemently, leaning in close to the man, glaring out all of his raging, searing fury with his pale, cold eyes.
I just broke your wrist. If you ever in your life touch him or any other kid ever again, that next time it will be your neck.
The man sputters, pawing at his unmovable metal arm, with his uninjured hand gasping and shaking in his grip. Bucky steps back and throws the man to the ground, letting him scream out loudly in pain as he tries to catch himself on his broken wrist. Seething, Bucky briefly considers taking the rest of his anger out on the man, his arms still thrumming with the barely constrained desire to beat him to death, so powerful that Bucky's entire body is shaking, his shoulders quaking, but the effort of holding his arms back, of keeping himself from killing someone in front of Peter. Peter! Before he can even turn around, Bucky feels a small, trembling hand cautiously brush against his metal one, and he looks down and sees Peter's soft, pale fingers wrapping around his large silver ones, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze, even though Peter is shaking too. The violent energy vibrating in Bucky's arm is siphoned out of him like gasoline, evaporating into the air around them. Bucky looks up at Peter's shocked face, white as a sheet, and barely stops himself from pulling the kid into a bruising hug.
Kid,
he starts to say.
Are you all right?
Peter surges forward, wrapping his arms around Bucky's middle and clinging to him, burying his face in his chest. Bucky hugs him back automatically, not even thinking about it, his own hands shaking until they can feel Peter unharmed, alive. I made it in time, against their palms, holding him tightly against his chest. He takes Peter by the shoulder and leads him out of the alleyway, out of the industrial complex, back to the main road and toward the direction of their apartment, his arms still around the kid's shoulders, hugging him to his side protectively, refusing to let go of him until their door is shut.
Peter,
he says when the boy flops down bonelessly into the love seat. He stands there awkwardly, hands clenching and unclenching into fists, not sure where to even begin when Peter looks up at him.
Listen, what happened wasn't your fault, but you need to be more careful. You can't just follow strangers around whenever they ask you to. What if I'd gotten there too late? Why didn't you fight him off?
Peter pulls his knees up to his chest, wrapping his arms around them, and looks down ashamedly. I didn't want to hurt him.
He was assaulting you, kid,
Bucky says incredulously, sinking to the floor in front of Peter so they're closer to eye level.
You'll fight purse snatchers and car thieves, but not someone who's trying to...
That's different, Peter says, hugging himself tighter. When I fight criminals, that's not me! That's Spider-Man! That guy, he said he'd seen me before at Del Mars, and I was stupid and told him my name, and if I fought him and he realized I wasn't, and realized I have superpowers, then what? I'm a mutant runaway foster kid. If the government found out about me, they'd ship me off to the Air Force Base in Nevada where they keep all the aliens and the mermaid!
Okay, hold on,
Bucky says, gently grabbing Peter by the arms to thwart his frantic ranting.
First of all, kid, no one is going to take you anywhere. I'd never let that happen, okay?
Genuine, unrepentant fear fills Peter's eyes at that, and he whispers in a trembling, childlike voice, You promise? Bucky takes the boy's head in his hands, keeping their gazes locked together.
Yeah, kid, I promise. I won't let anyone take you anywhere that you don't want to go. I said I'd take care of you, yeah? So listen to me.
He leans in slightly, speaking slowly and clearly to emphasize his words.
I don't ever want you to be scared of defending yourself, Peter. I'm not going to tell you not to help someone who asks for it, because you probably wouldn't listen even if I did. But you can't hold back if someone attacks you. You have to protect yourself, too. You have a responsibility, and listen, if there are consequences, then we'll deal with them together. You aren't on your own anymore, Peter.
Peter gazes back at him, nodding once, a small abortive movement that ends with tears rolling down his cheeks. Peter closes his eyes, lowering his face, and brokenly says, I was so... He sobs, holding himself, sniffling as the tears come faster. He tried to...
Shh, kiddo. Hey.
Bucky says, sitting beside him on the love seat and letting Peter burrow against his chest, wrapping his arms around him tightly, his left hand carding through the boy's hair.
It's all right. You're all right. I've got you.
He's all right. He is. I made it in time. Peter presses against his side and chest, hugging him back tightly, sniffling as his sobs and tears die down. I left my backpack at the Mars, he confesses quietly, voice slightly muffled. Bucky's eyes rubbing his forehead.
Oh, let me guess, it's full of homework you need to complete before tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Bucky says, giving the kid a couple reassuring pats on the back.
I guess we're getting sandwiches after all.
When Bucky gets home from work, he immediately knows that something is wrong. And that something isn't the fact that he's drenched down to the bone from the onslaught of rain. No, it's that when he opens the door and steps in, dripping copious rainwater all over the floor, Peter isn't there. And there's no note on the counter where he always leaves them when he goes out. Bucky glances around the room, looking for signs that anything is misplaced as he changes out of his wet clothes, hanging them to dry on the bathtub's curtain rod. He snags his towel and begins patting himself down as he looks around, but everything looks the same, down to the microscopic detail. Peter's backpack isn't here, which means he never made it home from school, but today isn't a tutoring day, and the kid's never forgotten to tell him where he was going before. But maybe there's a first time for everything. Maybe he was just overwhelmed by all of his schoolwork and needed the internet as soon as possible and rushed out without writing a note. Maybe he didn't want to get wet and is waiting out the rain somewhere with no payphones nearby to call Bucky's cell. Or something happened, an accident or crime that needed Spider-Man's attention, and either way he'll walk through that door any minute, wet and hungry and home safe. Pacing, Bucky desperately tries to stomp down on the nagging thought of maybe he won't. This doesn't feel like the last time when that creep lured Peter off the streets. No, this doesn't feel like impending dread. It's just the uncertainty of it, that's all. Bucky can't plan or coordinate a strategy when there's this much uncertainty, and that worries him. Because Peter's fine. Of course he is. He's probably petting a dog somewhere, standing directly under the darkest rain cloud and not caring one bit that his clothes are completely soaked through, because there's a dog happily wagging his tail at him. That's what it always is. Whenever Peter's late, he got sidetracked with some kind of animal and is off petting it someplace he shouldn't be. Or maybe he isn't. Maybe Peter isn't late on accident. Maybe he's late on purpose. Maybe he realized somehow what Bucky is and took off. Maybe if he figured it out. What if he figured it out? Maybe watching him nearly kill that pervert tipped him off, or else frightened him into finding another home, or even choosing to remain on the streets. If Peter found out about him, about Hydra, about where his arm came from, what he's done with it, is this what he would do? Just disappear one day with no notice? Leaning against the back of the love seat, Bucky stares at the window, not through it, because the newspapers are still taped up to the glass, and listens to the heavy rain, his mind racing, switching back and forth between calm and panic, never staying on one long. When he can't sit still anymore, and can't stand waiting around worrying for even one more second, Bucky grabs a dry sweater and turns to the door just as the sound of footsteps reaches his ears, and then the door is being pushed open, revealing a soaking wet, panting Peter clutching a soaked cardboard box. "Hi!" Peter says between pants, smiling, something shy tinting his expression. He steps inside and shuts the door, water pouring off the box and dripping from the bottom of it, puddling beneath his drenched shoes as he stands awkwardly in front of the door. "So, don't be mad!" Bucky eyes the box suspiciously before turning his gaze toward Peter, raising one eyebrow at him questioningly.
Well, that's a good sign.
Peter smiles, nervous, and slowly kneels down to place the box very gently on the floor. "Could you please hand me my towel?" he asks, and Bucky nods and goes to retrieve it for him. "Thanks," Peter says, and to Bucky's surprise, he doesn't start drying himself off. No, he spreads the towel out on the floor, opens the box, reaches in, and pulls out... Oh, hell no. No way. "I don't want to keep them!" Peter protests immediately, setting the tiny, shivering kitten down on the towel with exceptional care, then reaching back into the box.
Them.
I found them in an alleyway, Peter says, and Bucky leans over and peers into the box, sees another 3 baby cats curled together on top of the soaking cardboard in a tiny shivering pile. I think with the rain and the traffic, I was the only one who could hear them crying. Somebody just dumped them in a box. There was a note that said free to a good home, but they're clearly not old enough to be taken from their mom yet, and besides, their box was filling up with water. They wouldn't have drowned if I just left them. Bucky kneels down beside Peter, watches him move each kitten slowly under the towel, and gently rub them with the corners of it to try and dry them off.
Kid, we can't have pets here,
he says regretfully, hating the way Peter's face tightens. I know, the boy says. I promise I'm not trying to keep them. Just until the rain stops. I ran around for a while trying to find the closest animal shelter, but they were soaked and cold, and I was worried they'd get sick, and just until the rain stops, please. I'll take them to the closest shelter I can find. Bucky sighs, pinching the bridge of his nose to stifle the budding headache he can feel growing behind his eye sockets.
Just until the rain stops,
he says firmly, giving Peter a pointed look.
And you're cleaning up after them if they make a mess.
I will, Peter says, smiling, gently picking up the bundle of kittens in their towel and moving them into the living room.
Dry off before you touch anything,
Bucky says, grabbing one of his already dirty shirts and using it to wipe up the puddle on the floor. Peter obeys, changing into dry clothes and hanging his wet ones next to Bucky's in the bathroom, before snatching the shoebox he'd been using as a pencil holder and emptying it into his backpack. Peter sets the shoebox on the love seat and gently places the kitten bundle into it, rearranging the towel so it's sufficiently filling the hard bottom of the box. Look at them! Peter coos, eyes practically twinkling with awe. They're so tiny!
They are,
Bucky agrees, coming over to glance into the box again before flopping down tiredly on his mattress.
What do you want to have for dinner?
Want a whole one? Bucky blinks, lifting his head slightly to look across the room at Peter, gently holding one of the kittens out to him in his palms.
Huh?
Come on, look at him, he's so cute! Peter urges, grinning, trying to beckon Bucky back over with a little ball of fur. Hold him, you know you want to. Bucky glances at the kitten. It looks small in Peter's hands, which means it would be even tinier in his, and that's just asking for trouble, especially with his arm not functioning properly 100% of the time. Not to mention they look so fragile. He has no business being anywhere near them.
No, kid, I don't think so,
Bucky says, sitting up on the mattress and scooting back to lean against the wall.
I'd hate to accidentally. It's not a good idea.
Peter's smile falters and his hands lowering slightly, like he's surprised that Bucky said no. You won't. It's okay, he says reassuringly, adjusting his grip on the kitten and holding it back out again. You won't hurt him, I know you won't. Unintentionally, Bucky winces, hating the level of trust and faith in Peter's tone, his confidence in him, in the idea that Bucky won't hurt things, when all he's done is hurt things his entire life.
I can't,
he says, closing his eyes to block out the sad look on Peter's face. He doesn't want to disappoint or upset the kid, but he's not the gentle, benevolent person Peter thinks he is. He doesn't want to harm anything, but that doesn't mean he won't do it anyway. That's something Bucky knows very well. He feels the mattress dip as Peter crawls onto it, but Bucky keeps his eyes closed, not minding if Peter cuddles after him. At least he knows that Peter isn't mad. He's a little surprised when the kid gently cups the back of his left hand, and completely shocked when something light and small and moving is placed in his open palm, weirdly warm against the cool metal. Bucky's eyes shoot open and he looks down, anxious, at the sight of the small, damp black kitten squirming gently in his hand, quietly mewing. Peter holds the back of his hand in both of his, tightly but gentle also. See? He says, looking up at Bucky's face, then back down at the kitten. It's okay. You can touch him. He can feel Peter's grip on his hand, the strength keeping his fingers open, keeping his arm from malfunctioning, and Bucky hesitantly raises his right hand and brings it down beside the kitten, letting it nuzzle its face against his fingers with its unbelievably soft fur. Holding his breath, Bucky gently runs the back of his fingers down the kitten's spine, petting it, scared to apply too much pressure, but enthralled with the somehow relaxing sensation of holding this small creature, of feeling it move and breathe in his hand, its tiny heart beating against his metal palm, sending the vibration all the way up into his body. Bucky leans further down, looking closer, continuously stroking the kitten until it starts licking his fingers, trying to suckle on the ends of them. He pulls his hand back, letting Peter hold onto his fingers with one hand, while he gently lifts the kitten with the other, taking it back over to the box. The kittens all meow when Peter sets the fourth into the box, and he smiles down at them lovingly and starts petting them all with both hands, his expression so fond that it makes Bucky's chest clench. He wonders idly if that's the same face he makes when he looks at Peter. He glances down at his left arm, at the familiar grooves and indentations in the metal, and realizes dully that had been the first time ever that his left hand had held something alive and vulnerable, without the intention of hurting it. The hand that had taken all those lives, that had been Hydra's weapon, a tool for evil, had just innocently held a living thing for the very first time. Lost in his thoughts, Bucky doesn't notice Peter's return until the kid reaches out and gently touches his left hand again, grabbing his attention. Bucky looks up at him, analyzing his face, confused by the myriad emotions he finds there. Peter looks soft but determined, cautious and yet somehow confident. There's affection in his eyes, but there's also apprehension. But most of all, Peter looks completely devoted. "Let me look at it," he says softly, squeezing Bucky's metal fingers for emphasis. "Let me help you, I can fix it." Bucky searches his eyes, wary, but the unwavering faith he finds there, in himself and in Bucky all at once, tramples down on the temptation to once again say no, to pull his hand back, to glove it so Peter can't even see it. Instead, he lets Peter hold on to it, lets him turn it over, inspecting it, and with a deep breath he bites the bullet and says, "Okay." Peter's face breaks into the widest, brightest grin Bucky's ever seen. He's up off the mattress in a flash, rummaging through his backpack to fetch his assortment of school project tools, and then rushing back over to him and settling down beside Bucky, like he's scared the man will change his mind if he takes too long. He pulls off his sweater and lets Peter take his arm, lets him get his first real close-up look at it, watching as wonder and excitement and admiration all cross over the kid's face. Peter turned his arm this way and that, figuring it out, looking for where to start, and Bucky lets him get close, lets him trace curious fingers over the red star. He watches Peter work, observes the smooth motions of his hands as he examines Bucky's arm, as he uses each tool with expert precision, operating on his prosthetic like a surgeon, with a rapt expression of someone very different from the bubbly, clumsy teen Bucky knows. He sits still and quiet as he watches Peter fix his arm, the sound of rain hitting the balcony filling their apartment all evening long.